even more.
Yeah,
so.
it's hard to be on it. I think, but that's what we were saying earlier about rigid ideologies. Rigid ideologies are always problematic because there's so many open-ended questions when it comes to being a human being on Earth, and that is a problem with religions. And that one of the things that religions do by creating these rigid ideologies is they make things so that you don't have to question stuff, and that gives some people comfort. If you know that these are the rules and you don't have to think about why homosexuality is bad or why you know fill in the blank, whatever the issue is. When someone defines something like that for you, it makes it so you have less questions and you have comfort in these truths, air quotes. But that's not good for anybody. It's bad for everyone involved because they're not. I mean, there are some things that I think we've all learned. Be nice to people, and it feels better to them. Feels better to you. You have a healthier existence when you have harmony with your neighbors, and when you can create a good community of people that are being harmonious together and friendly together. It's a really nice place to live. That's pretty much a universal truth. There's a bunch of those that exist, but even those can be debated and discussed, and you find various approaches to the end goal of happiness. Whenever you have someone who wrote down a bunch of wacky shit like this, and then you have seemingly intelligent people defending it, like that woman that we were discussing. And that woman she did not seem stupid at all.
No, I'm sure I was reliably informed because in the film we go off and meet her ex-husband, who's now no longer in Scientology, and he describes her as a very sensitive, caring person. A lot of the assertiveness she shows, I think she probably acquired through Scientology and a lot of Scientology training in terms of what it imparts to people is a quality of being direct, being assertive, being confident, being in charge, and being okay with sort of dominating the situations that you're in. It's one of the reasons that I think it appeals a lot to actors because it works, I think, for people who have any sort of insecurity or who are going into situations of uncertainty, and it allows you to almost reprogram your circuits in some way and be okay about using assertive body language and speech. And it also imparts a sense that you have all the truths necessary to save humanity from itself, not just humanity on Earth, but throughout time and space. And it is your obligation to ensure that those truths are saved for posterity and communicated as widely as possible in a totally unadulterated fashion, because any adulteration of the message means that not only do they not work, they become toxic and dangerous.
It seems to me that there's a bunch of things going on, and that there's some aspects of it that maybe could be beneficial, that they could extract from that.
I'm sure.
Almost like these people that have abandoned Scientology can start Scientology Light.
Well, they do. They are doing that.
Are they?
Yeah, but one of the funny things is once you have Scientology Light, it's called the indie movement, independent Scientology, and it's often an analogy is made with Martin Luther and Protestantism, when people said, there's nothing in the Bible about the papacy, really. There's nothing about selling indulgences and having palaces in Rome, in the Vatican. So actually, really, there's just stuff in the Bible about, following Jesus and reading the Bible. So shouldn't that be what we're doing? And so they go off. You have Protestantism. The trouble with the independent movement is, it turns out that if you remove the rather predatory money-raising side and the sort of fundamentalist controlling side, you get something a bit wishy-washy that's more or less indistinguishable from many other sort of self-help creeds. It sort of loses its potency. It's almost that the authoritarian dimension of Scientology and the way in which it demands total obedience from its followers is intrinsic to its ability to have an effect.
That's fascinating. People do, in some way, gravitate towards discipline, and that you see that in the military, like the benefit of yes sir, no sir, like that.
And one of the things I talk about in the film is, we talked as well about the appeal of Scientology. Why do people defend it? So it works for some people. I think there's an obvious thing of the thin end of the wedge. You know, you get in knee deep, and then you think, well, I've come in this far, so even though I've got doubts, I'll go a little further. And then you sort of reach a tipping point of commitment where it becomes almost embarrassing to back out. You're sort of $100,000 or more in. You're 10 years in. Your family is annoyed with you. A lot of them you don't see. It's very hard to walk away from that commitment. So there's all these powerful, compelling reasons for why. But the other part of it is, and this is the part that I, as an outsider, appreciate and I own up to in the film, is that there's something grandiose. It's a bit like Trump, right? You see these gilded casinos, you see these towering, shiny buildings, you know, they're kind of over the top and grotesque, but they're also sort of majestic and imperial. And if you ever watch Scientology footage, there's some of it's on YouTube, and you see how they are very good at a certain kind of over-the-top aesthetic. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Almost a kind of Leni Riefenstahl-esque, with lights and flaming braziers and thousands of people surging upward in unison, and it has an effect. You sort of think, wow, these guys know how to run a show.
Yeah.
If you go into any org, have you been into they call them orgs, right?
No.
Short for organization. Okay, so near where I'm staying in Los Feliz, there's one. It's on Hillhurst, I think. And you go in, and it feels like you're kind of in a religious library, sort of designed by J. Peterman, you know, like the catalog company, and it had sort of old globes and kind of distressed wooden furniture and wicker chairs, and it feels like it's got like a slightly colonial, golden age of exploration feel. Do you know what I mean? And it feels very, you're sort of swept up in this narrative of we're in a place where there's adventure and a sense of order, and actually there's a sort of seductive quality to it.